know equations, I would think you need to know that pressure is the product of flow and resistance to flow. That's what agrees to pressure. I would also think it's reasonable that you know that oxygen consumption is the product of a flow times an extraction. And I think whether, by the way, this could be done in the pulmonary system, but we haven't gotten the pulmonary system yet, so you don't need to know this one. Know the cardiac one. And those, I think, are the main calculations. You do need to bring a calculator. I'll bring about 8 of them. I'm charging them up. And you do need to bring a Scantron, which I thought I had one, but you know it is. The salmon-colored UCB 2000. Is that okay? Yes, ma'am.
Is there a graph calculator over there?
Yeah. Yeah. I reserve the right to look at what you got in there. If you put the whole text into the calculator, I might object. But other questions? The person is just passing. Just a point about what we're going to do, or what I'm proposing. So I'm willing to hear objections. They have to be well thought out and not just making trouble. But if you look at Canvas, I posted, I redid the class schedule 3 times over our break because they kept canceling it. Oh, sure, now what do I do? I'm sure you had the same experience. So here's our 2 weeks off. And if you look at what I've done, we're going to finish cardiovascular today, and I'm really sort of condensing 1 into 2. Our pulmonary series, I'm going to sort of knock the fluff out of it and try to do 4 lectures in 2, not by talking faster, by being more selective in my example. Then notice on this coming Friday and the Friday after that, we have 2 Fridays left, I've arranged to have the lectures continue over at Young Hall. So on Friday. Now I can't make you come to these. The rules of the registrar are quite clear. And so I'm going to arrange for someone to make those little video things you guys do, little like YouTube clips. I can't promise I'm as hilarious as a cat playing a piano, but we will make a video of it and post it to Canvas should you be not coming. By the way, one of the things I put it on Friday is, in theory, because you have a Monday through Thursday class, your Friday ought to be open. Now I know many of you have put work or internship experience. Because of what has happened to our corridor, I strongly suggest, if you haven't yet, talk to your supervisors and your employers to try to drop some of the time you're spending on extracurriculars for the last 2 weeks. Because remember, why you're here to begin with is classes, and if you fail your classes, suddenly that extracurricular stuff doesn't matter. Is that okay? And where is my Jayender? Here's your lecture on urine outflow and thermoregulation next week. Wherever he is. Yes?
Have you decided on the time for Friday?
Oh yeah, it's going to be exactly the same time as our normal class.
Okay.
I'm trying not to throw new things at you, so just continue to get up and come to class on Friday as you...
Wait, did you say that Friday was the 29th?
It's the 30th. If it said it's the 29th, it's wrong. Okay? Oh, look at here. It says it's the 30th. Okay, so on with today's lecture. I think we stop around here, and we're going to skip some things, and I want you to be very brave about I'm not going to ask you about them in order to get somewhere. So we're not going to talk about what's happening inside the active muscle beyond the fact that the venous muscle pump is pressurizing the blood to come home. So you can ignore this, and ignore that, and ignore this. And what we're about to talk about, if I remember right, Moses, you guys won't remember, Moses probably won't remember, but I had been talking about how during exercise we hold our blood pressure constant, and if anything we elevate it slightly. And Moses had an immediate objection, and Jayender today asked the same thing. I get lightheaded sometimes, right? Why would someone get lightheaded? Well, So we're going to talk about where the cardiovascular problems that can arise during exercise, and when someone is my age, they may have trashed up their perfectly decent heart that they were born with through 60 years of bad living on the planet. So that's really common for old people. When old people fall over without a pulse, it's their heart. When young people fall over, it's almost always a problem with their peripheral circulation. With venous return, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your heart. And so we're going to start to look at that. I think you're aware, particularly once you've adapted to the exercise state and you're dependent on that venous muscle pumping to provide blood back to the heart to fill the extraordinarily open circulation on the arterial side, you can't just stop. You're doomed. You must slowly turn off the exercise circulation and bring it back to the normal resting state. If these soldiers have been marching and are asked to stand at attention, I think anyone with military practice knows I'm wiggling my toes inside my boots and I am flexing my calves in a way that hopefully the public doesn't see. This is maintaining my venous muscle pumping. If you don't do this, venous return falls and then you fall. We will skip that figure. It's an elaborate example of what I just said. So the last comment for 25 is, even during exercise, so Moses, one of the most, if you think to yourself, when do I get dizzy? It'll almost always be immediately after intense exercise. And the classic one is, 25, and you rack it. Because in the squat, you're elaborating huge amounts of vasodilatory metabolites. So the arterioles in your legs are opening and opening, with each progressive rep. They're opening and then the thing that's keeping you conscious is the expulsion of the blood from the legs with each contraction. So when you rack it and stand there with relaxed legs, all the blood falls into your relaxed lower limb, and you will tend to become at least lightheaded, if not pass out completely. The other day, just for complete lack of thought, I racked something after squatting, and I went and I hung from a pull-up bar. Don't ever do that, because there's no venous muscle pumping at all. I hung from the bar, and it's like I was hanging there about 2 seconds, and thought, oh my God. I started walking around the gym trying to get my pump going. Okay, so the most common time that there is a cardiovascular collapse in young people during exercise is in the immediate post-exercise period, especially if they've pushed very hard. A sprint finish in the 10K, and then they stand in the finisher's lane with relaxed limbs, drop like flies. The last point I want to make is that peripheral circulation changes can actually limit the exercise itself. That people can actually start to destabilize during the exercise. And this is a phenomenon called cardiovascular drift. You may have noticed if you go to the ARC, the ARC, and you train indoors, I don't know if any of you have noticed, but you may have a higher heart rate indoors than outdoors. Another thing you may notice if you have a Fitbit or something that monitors is when you're running outdoors at a constant speed, your heart rate is constant. Indoors, you may notice that every 5 or 10 minutes, your heart rate bumps up a little higher. Well, indoors lacks the natural airflow that we would generate on our own, and it creates a really interesting phenomenon called cardiovascular drift. And cardiovascular drift is not a good thing. It's a destabilization of the cardiovascular system. Notice the capital is on V, not C, during prolonged single load exercise over an hour. And what you tend to see is the cardiac output is maintained. If the cardiac output falls, the patient falls and the exercise ends. That's only been done 2 or 3 times in the literature, and it's such a rude thing to do, we stop doing it. So as long as the person can maintain the exercise, they'll maintain their cardiac output. But you start to see this really interesting thing when the stroke volume begins to fall and the heart rate is going up. This is the only other cardiac reflex. When heart rate tries to increase to compensate for dropping, you see this in hemorrhage. You see this other cardiac reflex, opposite of the one that I showed you before, where if there's filling, heart rate goes up. Well, here's the only other cardiac reflex. When there is inexplicable unfilling of the heart, you get a sympathetic response to try to drive the heart rate up. So notice also that a highly regulated variable, remember we said that with exercise, the mean arterial pressure should be constant and about 10% above the normal resting value. Here we have a critically regulated variable falling by over 10%. So, are you ready? Yes, sir?
Question, so this is because maybe like when you're indoors, you're taking in more CO2, so then your body is basically just having to...
Oh, that's a fun idea.
increase the
No.
amount of oxygen.
The answer is no, but I like what you're saying. If we were thinking about carbon dioxide as a vasodilatory chemical, which it is, you'd be saying the peripheral circulation is somehow dilating more in that condition. Then you'd be right. By the way, working out indoors in a properly ventilated, you get CO2 doesn't it? It takes a lot. You have to be trapped in a mine or a closet or safe for your CO2 to rest in ambient air.
But then your heart rate also increases as well when you breathe in, I believe, right?
Oh, you're thinking, okay, we're on a different set of reflexes. That's a resting reflex that is gone by the time we're doing this. Yeah, very good. Let me give you the quick version of what's happening. So when we see the falling stroke volume, it's not, remember, venous return is not, oh, this is a picture of the cardiovascular system. That's the central blood volume, which is providing in this hydraulic illustration, that height represents the filling pressure of the atria, the stretch on the atria, okay? This would be that's the left ventricle creating high pressure. These are the arterioles feeding the muscle bed and various floppity beds. We've made a very simple circulation. Well, what's happening, remember, initially people would say venous return is dropping. No, if venous return dropped, cardiac output would drop and exercise would end. But what is happening is the amount of end diastolic stretch on the heart is starting to go away during this cardiovascular drip. Less blood is making it back into the heart for stretch. So you get a same total amount of blood arriving, but it's under lower pressure. If the right atrial pressure was 3 during exercise, now it's dropped back to 0. Well, where is that blood that used to be here stretching the heart? The skin, remember we saw how the skin is initially turned off when you start exercise. If you're outdoors on a day like today and exposing skin, that skin will stay shut. It's cold, and you're not having a problem shedding heat. You don't need to pump blood into the skin. If you're exercising indoors in the arc, where there is no airflow, if you're on a stationary bike or a treadmill,